All right, we are live.
Welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming.
Are we starting? Is it 6? We're live. We're doing. Are we doing the pre?
There were too many things going on.
We're
Take it
actually
away.
live.
Okay. All right.
We won't start the actual interview for a few minutes. So in the meantime, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. Those that have physically come here and those who are on Facebook. We really appreciate you showing up. I'm Barbara Way. I'm the Executive Director of the Front Royal Women's Resource Center, and our mission is to
Empower women.
Well, that's
It's
our
right
vision.
behind you.
Empowering women to change their world. That's our vision. Our mission is to reach out to women in our community, and we connect them with programs, information, and education. So, and all of this is part of it. We do this every third Thursday of the month. We also have a networking, which will be next Wednesday during the daytime, and everyone's welcome to come. That is the 4th Wednesday of the month. And that's bring your own lunch or grab it next door at the Daily Grind on Main Street, and we have women speakers coming about to talk about their businesses and what they do in the world, and we just connect. So thank you all for being here. We do have a few things coming up, and I'll just mention we have a community yard sale. This is our annual appeal month, so please visit us at our website, which is frwrc.org, and we time it for International Women's Friendship Month, which we think is really important. So please help us in our mission to move women forward in the world and connect them. And I'm going to hand this over to Eka Kapiotis, who is our host for these events and a woman extraordinaire. She has her own business, which is Dream Weaving, right?
The Dream Weaving Way.
Right, Dream Weaving Way.
Thank you. Speaking
Yes.
of international friends.
yes, we are international.
We are
friends.
international friends.
Yeah,
too.
we are.
Okay.
So,
Thank you very much, Barbara. And I'm very thrilled to be here on behalf of the Front Royal Women's Resource Center. And my guest tonight is Debbie Copeland, another wonderful international friend. I'm so happy that you're here. And the Woman Gatherings, I love to, Joyce, the president of our association, said, hi, that these are, that some events are about knowledge, but this one is about wisdom. And I love that. And Debbie Copeland cannot be a better example of a wise woman. She's an author, a Reiki master, a woman that has a really wide range of experiences and a wide range of, because you were a court reporter for many years, so she saw lots of things that gave her wisdom beyond what I could probably ever imagine. And a grandmother and a spiritual activist. So, and I wanted to invite Debbie because she has she's written, well, actually we had her on the radio show a number of years ago when she wrote a book called The Edification of Sissy Dare, which is a wonderful novel. And she's working on another book and a screenplay. But this other book is about Woodstock and other notions.
Wild notions.
Other wild notions. So welcome, Debbie.
Thank you.
And so we were really, because this is the year of the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. So, and I know we even scheduled this to be a month after, because you were hoping to go to the Woodstock reunion, which didn't happen, sadly. But was still a whole lot of stuff came out about Woodstock. So,
And it still is.
it still is, yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your book.
Well, it's called Getting Back to the Garden, an Assertion of Woodstock as a New Sermon on the Mount, and Other Wild Notions. So, of course, most people that I talked to initially about the project, when I told them I was going to compare Woodstock to the Sermon on the Mount, thought that was a pretty wild notion.
Yes.
And so the book is a collection of essays that covered lots of different topics from Woodstock, and how, to me, I make a pretty good argument for it being a really strong message today that compares to the message that Christ had when he gave the Sermon on the Mount. And I don't know if you all have read the article. There was excerpts from the book published at a magazine called Rebel Society, and so a lot of that is laid out, but we could talk about it more. And then other things that are explored are just generally the state of what's happening in the world today. And each essay, each chapter focuses on a different topic. There's one that explores the prophecies of indigenous cultures and the spiritual beliefs and practices of shamans, and how they can be applied and lessons can be learned in the Western industrialized world, really important lessons from these indigenous cultures. And another thing as an aside that was so interesting when I started doing the research is how a lot of what I was learning about Woodstock I could also apply to the things I was discovering about shamanic practices. And each chapter has been like that. They're all sort of weaving together, even though they're all about different topics. I just finished an essay on Billy Graham. so they all have a spiritual theme, but a secular theme too.
So tell us in a kind of an overview of, I read your articles, and it is on Rebel Society, which is REBELLE, society.org. .com. And you would just look up your name as an author, search your name.
If you Google Debra A. Copeland Woodstock, it will come up.
Great.
Yeah.
That makes it easy, easy to remember. So talk a little bit about that. I read it and I thought it was fascinating, and I loved how you wove so many things that people said and what they did into your theory. But can you share about that?
Yeah, gosh, there's so much to share, but one of the first things that comes to mind is how, it was a terrible setting. There were severe storms. There were 500,000 people on this little piece of land, and there were food shortages, and even before the event, they were concerned about riots because of what was happening in the country at the time. It was a really stressful time in 1969 with the Vietnam War and the Manson murders. It just happened before, I think, and so there was already really grave concern about riots, and it didn't happen. To me, in spite of all the circumstances that those people were dealing with, it was a mass demonstration of grace. There wasn't one incident of violence. And the one, I guess I started thinking about it, comparing it to the Sermon on the Mount, when I watched for the first time in 2009, I watched the movie Woodstock. I was 12 in 1969, and I never really had, just the stereotypical things like the hippies, and people might dress in a Woodstock theme for a party, but I never really given much thought to Woodstock until 2009 in August. It was the 40th anniversary, and our son had deployed to Afghanistan for the first time, and I was having a really hard time with that. And one night I just crawled in bed and decided to channel surf, and I landed on that. One of the stations was showing that movie. And as I watched it, I was like everybody else. I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with the whole thing and the music. And that's what I should say. It was a mass demonstration of grace with a really lot of amazing music.
Right. Was anybody there? Anybody have a relative or a friend that went? No?
Yeah, Carol was.
Carol was?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for a short time. Yeah.
Oh.
So I just started, drone by it. Everybody was singing hymns, and they were singing spirituals, and it just kind of felt like church to me. And it was opened by Swami Satchidananda, who had Yogaville. I mean, that's still there, but he's passed. And it was a beautiful spiritual message in which he told everybody there that America had helped the entire world with material things, with, you know, abundance and physical wealth, but it was time for America to help the world with its spirituality. And that was really profound to me.
Yeah.
And I think it's what those young people were doing there. You know, they came, they wanted a new message for the world. And it was a message very similar. They exercised to Christ. They exercised kindness and compassion and forgiveness and a lot of patience through that whole thing, you know?
Right, because it was, I mean, there were all those people, like you said, there wasn't food, it rained, it turned to mud.
It really rained, and they were in the mud, yeah.
And I think some people left their cars like 6 miles away and walked in. And
well, you know, so many people were trying to get there, like pilgrims, you know. They were trying to get there, and the roads just became jammed, and they'd just leave the cars on the road and walk in.
And the bands, too, couldn't get in.
Bands
right?
couldn't get in, and that's an interesting story, how, you know, Richie Havens had to go on first without his band and play everything he knew how to play, and they still didn't have the next act. And that's how his freedom song was born of the spiritual motherless child and I've got a telephone in my bosom. He sort of blended those two songs and created that incredible
on the spot. Right?
On the spot.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many things that happened that were just almost magical.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can say magical.
yeah.
Let's claim it.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Miraculous, right? I mean, that was kind of the Sermon on the Mount. These things came through that, you know, really changed.
And it's interesting, you know, there's so many different ways to look at it, and I did when I was doing research, and some of it people will poo-poo, but to me, it all has validity, like how Christ arrived at the beginning of the Piscean era, if you want to get into the zodiac and astrology. He arrived at the beginning of the Piscean era, and that was an era that was marked by hierarchical, you know,
The hierarchy.
yeah, the hierarchy and really severe patriarchal standards. And he sort of came to have a new message about all that. And then here, when Woodstock came, it was the beginning of the zodiac of the Aquarian age.
The dawning of the age
Right.
of Aquarius.
And they
right.
even advertised it initially as an Aquarian exposition. And so that's why to me it's just another new message of peace at another new time.
Yes.
That's why I draw the comparison.
And brought together with, you know, masses of people
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like to wonder, I mean, there's no way to know, but I wish to know what it was like at the Sermon on the Mount with all those masses of people. Were they in the mud too? And did they not have enough food? And
Yeah.
So, and there's one thing while I'm thinking about it, I just love that Jimi Hendrix said, and I want to get it out because I'll forget and not get it right, but he kind of summed it up. And when I read this, I thought, I really am onto something. Because he wrote in a poem after it, he said, 500,000 halos outshine the mud in history. We washed and drank in God's tears of joy. And for once and for everyone, the truth was not still a mystery. Doesn't that sound a little bit biblical?
Yes. And I think a lot of the songs and a lot of the things that people said were very spiritual.
Sly Stone, he took everybody. So many of them. Santana took everybody to church. You know? They did.
Melanie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you really read her art, it will make much more sense to see it all spelled out. Because it is, you bring a lot of different factors in. It's a lengthy essay.
Yeah.
Is that what you call it, an essay? Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, it's not a book length, but, you know, it's not just one little page.
And the excerpts at Rebel Society are just portions of the full essay. It's a little bit longer in its entirety, what will go into the book. But
Okay.
But yeah.
Oh, good. Can't wait.
Thanks. Well,
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited with. It's going well,
Great.
and I love how it's weaving itself together in ways I didn't even know that it was going to.
Yes, like it's all coming together. Yeah.
And the parallels. And still now, even in 2009 when I first got the idea, there were so many parallels between that time and 1969, but it's still the same now.
And what are the parallels that you're seeing?
Well, the unrest, the wars, the social crises. The women's movement was really just getting underway, the second wave of that in 1969, and now we have, incredible things happening now with women's rights. So it just continues to, I guess, grow, build on itself.
The intense polarization that is happening now was also happening then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why they were so worried about riots at the concert. Because but even when you watch the movie, if you've watched it, you can just see when the people are arriving, they look like they just want to come somewhere and know what it's like to have some peace
and ecstasy.
Yeah.
I mean, they look very ecstatic.
Yeah, and they probably were, I mean, a lot of people make jokes about the drugs, and there were drugs, but there was something bigger there.
Well,
maybe the drugs helped facilitate that, but there was something bigger at play.
And I was 14 in 1969, but I remember how hippies were looked down on, and
they were called freaks.
Freaks, right? And they were considered a real threat to society, and
they were.
Yeah, and really looked on like dirt. I mean, people would, if people saw hippies, they'd actually like spit on them and kick dirt on them, and really.
Well, that's what happened with the original site. About a month before the concert, the town of Wallkill rescinded the permit to have the concert because these people started showing up to build the structures and lay the pipes for the water, and they were hippies, and they didn't want them there. And they said, no, we're not going to let you have this.
And there they created something just remarkably beautiful and transcendent.
They did. And maybe with the fences coming down and people being able, it definitely changed the dynamic. I'm sure the producers and the organizers they were looking at it from a business perspective. They wanted to make money, and money was not made. And but I think as a result of all that, it created something even bigger than, well, obviously, 50 years later, we're still talking about it, and there's a museum built to it, and it still carries strong messages. So.
And actually, we saw the fellow that was in charge of the sound, and he was saying that they had never done anything like that before, but he recognized that there was going to be a need for sound to be able to project like it never had before. And so he was creating all these speakers and these great big huge things that had never been done.
Oh,
and because of that, people could hear in the distance that would have not ordinarily. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So a lot of foresight, or went into.
Yeah.
People were inspired to create this. Yeah.
I think the universe. This is my theory. The universe wanted it to happen. That's what I think.
Yeah. Did anybody want to ask any questions about that? About this particular subject? You've been nodding your head, and no? Okay. And I know there's some other parts of your book too. Did you want to talk about some of those?
Well, let's see. I've mentioned the one I'm writing about the shamans in the indigenous cultures.
I got to read that one too.
Yeah, I asked
did
Eka
like
to
that.
read that. I don't know which one I'm going to start next. I'm way behind schedule. I was hoping to have the whole project finished before the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, and it hasn't happened. And I still have quite a bit more to go on it. So, And I'm not even sure, I just finished the one essay and I'm not sure which one I'm going to start next.
Okay.
But there's one called America the Beautiful, where I'm kind of starting at the beginning and talking about all the issues that are in all the other essays and coming up to where we are now. And
What kind of issues in particular?
well, the same ones that we were dealing with in 1969. Of course, now we have even, more, even more urgent issues to deal with.
So there was the environment,
Yeah.
there was race, women's
War,
issues,
women's issues,
war, yeah,
yeah, poverty.
poverty. Yeah,
Yeah. So.
they haven't gone away, have they?
No, they haven't. So, but if you all don't have any questions about Woodstock, I might just share why I wanted to say when they asked me for my bio. I mean, we're all women are so many things, right? We don't just have one job, and what do I tell them I am? And I definitely want writer to be the first thing, because that I want that to be my real job. But since I've become a grandmother, that has become something that is really important to me, because it's got me thinking about the future in a way I never did. Probably wouldn't be if I didn't have grandchildren who can't do a thing about their future and what's happening now that they have no control over. And that is what has led me to say that I'm a spiritual activist instead of an activist, because I have gotten into activism, and I do it in a way, though, that I hope is leading to positive change. It's not so much fighting a system or an institution or a thing, but doing things which help move in a positive direction. Like right now, we're working on a project. I might even put in a plug for this. We're working on a project to help to encourage young people, all people, but especially young people, to get excited about voting. And we're having a program in Fauquier and Warrenton on Monday night called All Souls to the Polls. It's going to be at Lord Fairfax Community College, and it's going to be a history on voting in Fauquier County, and mostly from the African American perspective, because the main presenter of the program is Karen White, who's the president of the African American Historical Association in Fauquier. And it's going to be very interesting. It tells the story of what people went through to get the right to vote. And so we're hoping, this is going to be the first of a series of events, and we're hoping once we tell that story that people will realize, a lot of people suffered so that they could vote, and we don't even show up,
Yes.
So we're trying to fight voter apathy. Yes.
Yeah, no, I was, I did a lot of research on women's rights to vote, and I was very excited that I'm living here in Virginia, because Virginia had one of the first suffragette movements in the United States. Of all states, you'd be surprised. And what was originally a group of politicians' wives in Richmond, who, while their husbands were in DC, they were at the Shenandoah National Park with their children organizing marches. They marched right here on Main Street in Front Royal.
Really? Wow.
And then it
That might be
eventually
a
led
program
to
for
the
you all.
first
Actually,
League of
we
Women's
are
Voters.
doing it.
So again, the Virginia League of Women's Voters started with members from the suffragette movement. And when you read and you see how hard these women fought for a right that people just toss in the barrel. No, I'm
Yeah.
too busy.
Yeah.
Nah. Cannot find 2 minutes of my day to cast my vote. It's just shameful.
And yes, and it is, this year coming up, 2020 is 100 years since women fought and
Yes.
got the right to vote.
That's
and
correct.
so we want to do that. That is our theme for Spotlight. And our challenges are finding history, local history, and stories about this. So this is a great time to even kind of spread the word. We're hoping to talked to both Joanne and Marilyn, who did a bunch of research on this, and some other people are reaching out to the Historical Society and just as far as we can get, because it would be really nice to have the local history of what happened 100 years ago when women fought and won the right to vote. And just on another little aside, I'm sure you all heard Kobe Roberts died yesterday, and I heard on NPR she was being interviewed, and she said, and the interviewer said, well, the women were granted the right to vote, and she piped right in and said, no, they were not granted the right to vote. They fought for it. I thought, that's a really good reason and a way to look at it.
They fought and
They
suffered.
fought and they suffered.
They were jailed for it, and
Oh,
tortured.
yes,
And,
tortured and starved and,
yeah.
but, so it is. It's like we wanna step up and vote. Yeah.
And we want to have fun too.
Yes.
And I think the book is fun. I mean, even though it covers some, serious themes, you got to keep the music in there.
So what other topics did you want to bring up?
I think I have. Unless you all think of something else you want to ask me.
You mentioned you're working on a screenplay.
Yeah. Well, Eka mentioned that in, I guess it was 2012, I self-published the very first novel I ever finished. I have so many unfinished projects because I spent over 20 years in a really stressful, deadline-driven environment, and I could only write here and there when I had time. But I would start projects and work on them and then put them aside and start another one. And so I have 4 unfinished novels. And the first one I did finish, though, was The Edification of Sissy Dare in 2012. And I have decided that I want to write, and I have been working on it. I'm adapting it into a screenplay. And it's so much fun because when I wrote that novel, I listened to the lyrics of the Carter family, all that old-time music, and I wrote it kind of around those lyrics with a modern theme too, because she goes into Washington and gets involved in all the profanity up there. So the music was really important again on another project for me, and I've been watching the Ken Burns documentary on PBS. I don't know if you all have, country music. And I'm so excited, I can't wait. I'm actually thinking, now that I missed the deadline for the 50-year anniversary, I'm going to put this aside. Here I go again, putting a project aside because I'm just kind of into that music again and want to finish that screenplay.
How difficult is it, adapting to a screenplay? I took a class on writing screenplays and it was overwhelming. It's easy to come up with an idea, and I'm just going to, regurgitate wonderful words. Now you're adding stage direction and stage instruction.
It's hard,
and it's really complicated.
My novel was written in diary form, so it's the whole story is in this woman's head completely. And now I have to make people move, and it can't just be in her head. It can only be what you hear and see, right? But I have to say, it's making it pretty sharp, because it's making me correct flaws in the novel that I didn't catch till I'm doing this process, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. But I read a book on writing screenplays, and there was a movie out, and I can't remember the name of it, I hate to say, a couple years ago. It was really popular. Sorry, I don't remember the name. But I was able to download that screenplay. It's like open to the public. And it was a really popular movie. And I've been using that.
Was it Sex, Lies, and Videotape?
No, it was about
because that was one that I
Ladybird? Was it
restudied in
Ladybird?
school.
Lady Bird.
Yes, it's a great screenplay.
Right.
And it's really concise and clean, and there's no fluff in it. And I'm using that as my model. And it's going really well. Or it was until...
Kudos to you.
That was a couple years ago.
And can you say a little bit about Sissy Dare? I thought it was a wonderful book.
Well, she's an Appalachian girl. She comes from Southwest Virginia, She comes from Polk, P-O-L-K, she calls it Polk County, which is kind of Scott County in reality. That's where I went. I actually went and spent a week there and sat in restaurants and listened to people talking so I could get the dialect right. And so she has a series of misfortunes and she becomes an orphan. I mean, it's really like those old time songs. There's, you know, the orphans and mothers dying and trains and but yeah, it's got everything in it. But she goes to Washington and it's like going through a portal into a whole new universe and the things that she experiences there. And it's also got some strong storylines to do with women and relationships.
Different things that she deals with, like
the Me Too movement. Before it was a Me Too movement, she has to deal with all that.
and actually when you talked about her experience, when you know, related her experiences in DC, I was in DC at that time, and it was like reliving my life being there.
Really?
Yeah, it was just,
cool.
Yeah, it was really wild. Yeah. Because she gets involved, well, and I didn't, but I didn't get involved, but she kind of gets into high society, and then she sees, you know, the impoverished place that she came from versus people of wealth, and how different the dynamics are in some ways and how similar. They are
Yes.
in other ways.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
true.
So when she gets back home, it's a very different Sissy Dare than Kane.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's really true.
So we're looking forward to reading your, to watching your movie and reading your book.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to work. I'm going to get serious and finish this thing.
Do you have an anticipated publication date?
I'm afraid
No.
to even say.
No timeline, no.
We'll have you back when you do.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I'd
that'd
like
be
to
nice.
come back.
Yeah. We'll, you know, let people read it first so they know what you're talking about. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe you could post a link on the event page to the article that's been published out of your novel. You could do that. Or we could do that.
Yes.
We could do that. Yeah. Is it in there?
No, I said we can do that.
We can. Okay, great.
We haven't done it yet.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
can.
Okay. So, out of, what would you say the message is that you'd really like to convey out of, you know, you'd like people to take away from what you're doing with your books?
Well, now, I mean, tonight, I'm going to say peace, love, and music, right?
Yes.
That's the message. I mean, really, what else do you have to say?
Right. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding, right?
Yeah.
You're very good at
Yeah.
It's
So
true.
we'll leave it simple tonight.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So I think next month, did either one of you want to make any other announcements?
No, I think
Barbara, do you know who's being featured at the Women in Networking Luncheon next week?
Yes, I do.
Would you like to share that with us?
Hold on a second.
And let me just say
I knew
that
I was
next
gonna regret
next
that.
I know.
Right in front of
we
me,
have
there it
Melanie
is.
Ford will be here, and she'll be talking about her novel, Decanted Truths, and it is actually in print, so people can read it to prepare, and it's a wonderful novel. So she's a really great writer. We had her here. She wrote a trilogy on Hill Willa that was very enjoyable, wasn't it? So we're looking forward to having her. And then we'll have some parties through the winter, and maybe even in January we'll have another party.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
For a gathering, yeah.
Yes,
All right.
Actually, one of the things, now that, Joanne, thanks to Joanne Mulheron, who is our wonderful supplier of wine and other things, we hope to have a wonderful event called, what are we calling it?
Wine tasting and appreciation.
Right.
I just came up with that.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'll be doing a wine
Or
tasting.
wine tasting unraveled.
And
I think we-
teaching about getting the most out of your wine tasting and why people do things like swirl and what legs are, and you'll be tasting some amazing wine made right here in Virginia, and we're just gonna have a good time.
Yes.
And that kicks off our new year, January. That'll be January of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're that's going to do an event. We'll have it kind of bring a friend, hopefully introduce them to the Women's Resource Center. It'll be our membership drive, so we hope to bring more women in and just have a wonderful time. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much,
Thank you,
Debbie.
Deborah.
And I'd like to thank Jen Avery and Barbara and Tina for doing all the work to get our new look here and get our Facebook Live process done a little bit more. Get it?
And the bright lightning behind you.
And yes.
You don't see
Yes.
it like we do.
Okay, yeah, well, it definitely, we're in the glow.
You're glowing.
And thanks to Beth Waller for the space, and to Joyce for bringing out food, and to everyone who came. We really appreciate you being here. So thank you all, and see you next month.
Thanks.
Yay.